So what we're doing is we're looking at everything tools wise, but this time, for the last 4 weeks, we're going from the perspective of a job seeker. Before that, we looked at recruiter perspective, and we did 13 weeks of that. And we're going to spend 5 weeks looking at job seeker. So if someone's on this call that's a job seeker, they're going to get a lot out of this. However, if you are a recruiter, sourcer, coordinator, you're also going to get plenty out of this as well. And just as a reminder, the goals of the recruiting tools training is that it be interactive somewhat for researchers, sourcers, full cycle recruiters, so that they would understand the latest tools and really to also understand the mentality of job seekers, hiring managers, and so on. And then again, from that candidate standpoint, to understand what happens behind the scenes so they know what we're doing and take away the mystery of what goes on with recruiting, which would help them. So if both sides know what each other does, then maybe we can speed this process of finding a job and hiring. So this is the 4th week, and what we're doing here is taking the marketing funnel, which is here, and basically mapping it to the recruiting funnel. So we're using marketing principles from a job seeker standpoint. So if I'm looking for a job, how do I use marketing principles to find and be hired in a job? So again, this is the 4th week. And so far, everything has been going well for you as the job seeker. You've gotten awareness because you posted your resume someplace or you applied to a job, and recruiter actually opened it up. If you don't get an automated message, most likely one of two things happen. Either their system isn't sending automated messages, or possibly the recruiter has been looking at your resume. So you have the awareness, that's done. Next, you need to convince the recruiter to gain consideration. So you don't know that the recruiter has opened your resume. So there's other things, and we talked about that. Just refer back to the previous training on assuming the recruiter is looking at your resume. What can you do at that point? Next, so you've done that already. You got the consideration. How do you know you got the consideration? The recruiter will message you and say they want to talk to you. And really what they're doing is preparing you for the hiring manager, but first they're going to screen you further, make sure you are what you say you are in your resume, and to make sure you truly meet the requirements of the hiring manager as per the feedback that the hiring manager has been giving. So once the recruiter forwards to the hiring manager, now you're trying to get intent. And that's what we talked about last week. Intent means having the hiring manager interested enough to forward you to the panel, or at least recommend you to the panel. So the rest of this training is really going over that process. And the process is the recruiter, the hiring manager does a phone interview. For a recruiter, it's called a screening call. For the hiring manager, it is called a phone interview. Then the panel. Now, there could be other phone interviews, but generally speaking, the next major step is the panel interview. And that's where we're at right now. We're being recommended by the hiring manager to the panel. So it is now time to do panel interview. It is your job to get the panel so convinced that they're going to then recommend you for purchase, which would, in recruiting terms, that's an offer. Okay, so what are those steps? The steps are that these are the things you need to do between the hiring manager interview and the panel interview. You need to have been taking notes while you talk to the recruiter and the hiring manager. You should be researching the company, and keep in mind, you only have 5 to 6 companies that you're targeting. So you should be able to do all this. And you should be preparing your presentation to that panel. Now, this may seem like the cart before the horse, prepare for negotiation, but it is important that you prepare quickly and before you go too far. You should have actually prepared prior to the hiring manager interview in case the hiring manager goes into negotiation. And you should get at least one more of those 5 to 6 companies to be interested in you so that you don't appear desperate. Let's go back. We are going to start this. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and start. I'm going to go over the goals. We've seen these before. We are staffing professionals. We're trying to understand how tools and processes work, but we're also trying to dig into the minds of the job seeker, the candidate, and also from the perspective of the players. And there's a couple more players that we're not mentioning. We call them everyone: the recruiter, the hiring manager, the business manager, the staffing manager, candidate, and your referrals. You know, if you're a job seeker, you have to find who do you know at that company. That's the referral. And there's some other players that we'll talk about in the near future. So for 13 weeks, we went over this from a recruiter's standpoint, with a little bit on the job seeker. Each one of these had a job seeker point that was made. But for the last 4 weeks, we wanted to look at the marketing funnel and try to apply it to how a job seeker could get hired. So if you look at the last word here on each one of these, the awareness, consideration, intent, purchase, those are the main aspects of the marketing funnel. And we're wanting to apply that to what we're doing and put it in the terms of a job seeker. So this is advanced tools from a job seeker standpoint, and we are on item 4, the purchase. So just as a quick review, the awareness, simple. You post your resume, somehow it's in the system. Maybe you received a automated response saying, got your resume, thank you. Maybe you didn't. If you didn't, it's probably better than when you did because you're in the automation process. But if you didn't receive something, that could be that a recruiter is looking at your resume, and so you haven't gotten rejected yet. So the next step, as we described previously, was consideration. With consideration, and I'm going to go to the screen here, a little bit better of a description. The consideration is where the recruiter is interested. And you got that recruiter interested because the recruiter looked in your LinkedIn, saw some references or one of your referrals contacted that recruiter and said, I know this person and he's really good. Or in a simple sense, the recruiter opened up your resume and saw that you met the criteria. And criteria is not necessarily the job description. The job description is not often the exact criteria. The criteria is the hiring manager's feedback from reading other resumes. So recruiter believes that you meet those criteria and possibly looked at your references and decides to submit. They're convinced, so they submit to the hiring manager. This is what we went over in the previous weeks. Hiring manager looks at your resume. Recruiter often will sell you to that hiring manager with some text in the email. And the objective at this point is, of course, to be seen by the hiring manager, but that the hiring manager recommends you to the next step, which is the panel interview. So now, during and before the hiring manager, what can you do? You can, again, work your referral who may or may not know that hiring manager. You certainly don't know the name of the hiring manager, but they may, because they can apply your resume at the beginning of the process into the internal system. And generally speaking, that hiring manager may want to talk to your referral. So if all that's happening, then, or the manager just says, this resume looks really good, then the hiring manager will show intent by making the recommendation for you, the job seeker, to go to the next step, which is the offer/hire. So that's where we're at. And so we went through this. You got the awareness, you got the recruiter's consideration, you have the hiring manager's intent. And so the process was that the recruiter screened you, hiring manager did an interview, and now it's time for the panel. So the next step is to get the panel to recommend the purchase using the marketing terminology. And that terminology for hiring or for recruiting is the offer. You're trying to get the panel, and they get like a little scorecard while they're interviewing you, asking you questions, making you go to a virtual board and draw out things. And at the end of that, they rate you, and they also make a final. So these are the steps that you should be doing during the process, even before you have the consideration of the recruiter. You should be researching the company. You only have 5 to 6 companies that you're supposed to be targeting, so you should be able to do this. I'm going to switch here. Should be looking at my browser. So here is a person, you know how folks are, they're going to publish things on social media. But here is a person who applied to Google multiple times. And let me just make this a little bit bigger. And you can see that this person, I guess the name was Tiffany, has been rejected many, many times. Supposedly after this, she's hired, but she's shown all her rejections. And while she was being rejected over the years, she took every one of these emails, and you're lucky if they mention why they're rejecting you. But you can see at this first one here, unfortunately, after review, we will not be able to move forward your candidacy. And this is her trying to get an internship. the UX for the UI UX designer. We currently have a few other candidates in the pipeline. The team feels more aligned. Okay, so right there, me and what Tiffany did was, what team? Where's the UI UX team? So that's the research and the note taking that you could do. You could go and look up who is the team, what is their background, and what were their skills. That's going to give you an insight for the next one. Bottom line is she kept adjusting, and finally she got to the next level, which is the consideration of the recruiter. So once you're, and again, you don't have to wait for the panel interview. You can start this process since you only have 5 companies that you're targeting. You know, during the panel, you're going to have to do a presentation. They call it whiteboarding. And if you're a programmer, they're going to make you show some code. They may put you in a code environment in which everybody's staring at what you're doing. Or if you're in another role, they may have you just do a straight presentation. So hopefully you can look up for yourself on how to take your notes. This is called mind mapping. Take your notes and then turn it into that presentation. I do this all the time, where if I know I'm going to have a meeting, even though I'm not going to necessarily bring a PowerPoint in, I do a PowerPoint for myself and I go over it 2 or 3 times. I'm not going to necessarily bring a PowerPoint in. So depending on what you're doing, it may look kind of clunky, but at least you've organized your thoughts. And that's what the mind mapping is all about. And so you use, you take your topic, some call it a prompt, and sometimes you don't know what questions they're going to ask you, but on Glassdoor, you can research what questions have been asked. You can come pretty close. So you're going to have the topic, you know who the audience is. Often they're going to tell you the names of the interviewers. Go and research them. You're going to decide they're going to decide, I should say, the method, and they'll tell you it's going to be whiteboard, it's going to be a code environment. They're going to tell you, and they're going to tell you what the location is. And then we all know right now everything is virtual. So the location will be, you're going to be at home. There's going to be a whiteboard or something along that line. And you can choose your own visual aids, right, to make your point. And what I'm saying is that I've done this in the past. I strongly suggest that if you make a presentation for yourself, you kind of practice it 5, 6, 7 times. Find someone who doesn't mind hearing you and asking questions. I call them stupid questions, but I mean that tongue in cheek. If you have somebody who loves you enough to sit there and look at your presentation, then that's good. Okay, so that's the note-taking, the research leading to a presentation. That prepares you for the panel interview. And what I'm saying is you could have done that on day 1 as you picked your 5 companies. You can begin the process of doing this now. And the reason why I mention that is because the next step looks like you jumped so far ahead. You're assuming that the panel recommends you for the purchase, for the offer, and you got to prepare for negotiation. And just a word on this, sometimes during the recruiter screen, there's an attempt at a negotiation, or during the hire manager interview, there may be an attempt at a negotiation. So you should be prepared, because you don't want to say, I haven't thought about that, or maybe that is your strategy. I haven't thought about that. But we're going to show that a little bit here as well. So how do you prepare for negotiation? Now, salary negotiation is very important. It's something that you should think about. Let me just go back to this view here. Okay, let's open this up. Okay, well, let's do this. This graphic here is showing the right side is probably the interviewer, and then the left side is the candidate. And when I say interviewer, it could be the recruiter, could be the hiring manager, showing them across the desk. We're not going to see that for a while, but you can see she's asking for $3, $3 signs, and the other one is 2. That looks like about a 33% difference. And what do you do with that? If you haven't thought about it, you're going to be pushed around during that negotiation, okay? You need to have thought about this to the point of a script, okay? So there is a best time to discuss money, and I can tell you when it is. It's not on the recruiter screening call. It's not on the hiring manager interview call. It's after the panel. Okay, so you need to kind of push that off, and you're still interviewing with other companies. You need to always give off you're not desperate. Okay, things like money is important, but I'm really here. I mean, you only have 5 to 6 companies that you're targeting. You're one of the top companies that I'm targeting. Money's important, but what type of position that I'm going to have, what I'm going to be working on is just as important. And at this point, saying that you want to consider it the financial aspect, as we go along. Okay. Now, if they corner you, which recruiters are adept at doing, you can turn the conversation around. I don't know about the rest of the United States, but in California, you don't have to give your current salary, and they're not supposed to ask. They're supposed to ask you about desired. So you give them a salary range, is the best way to do it. Give them a salary range. Do not give them a specific number. And really, you can turn it around and ask, what is the salary range? Okay. So you're allowed in California to ask, what is the salary range? And I can tell you right now that they're not going to give it to you. They're going to give you a number that is somewhere in the salary range, if they give you a number at all. They may play dumb and say, well, I don't have that in front of me. I don't want to misquote it. Okay. But at least when they do that, you've got them off the conversation of salary. All right. So, because what you want is you want to get to the panel interview where you have the recruiter who is on your side, the hiring manager on your side. Now you got 3 out of 5 of the panel member who's on your side. Now it's time to talk about money. Okay. So that's basically what this is all about. And when you're negotiating, you better have a spreadsheet looking at your current situation, and look at your commute when commutes come back, look at your costs, the benefits. You can request a link to all the benefits. Be careful, because sometimes base salary, that's what recruiters negotiate off of. Base salary is not everything. For example, if for academic institutions, they'll pay for your children's education. What's that worth? What if you're working for Stanford SLAC accelerator, linear accelerator, and they paying you $5,000 less per year than, say, Google, but if your child is admitted to Stanford, it's a free ride. So you have to keep those types of items in mind. So that's the bottom line. And what I was saying is you got to go through this just like it's a script, without it sounding like a script, so that when you do get past the panel and it's time to really negotiate, because at that point, the real negotiation begins. The recruiter will get back to you and say, the panel was interested. They may not tell you how interested, but at that point, when they start to do that, you should have already practiced, at least in your head. And I recommend on paper, like a spreadsheet, so that you know what the benefits, what the base salary that and you've compared your current salary and your current benefits. Now, if you're out of work, I guarantee you, you're gonna appear desperate. So during this negotiation process, you must continue to find more jobs. And that's the power pose. Okay. The power pose is you have other opportunities. Okay. And what they're saying, power pose wise, is that you have that look on your face. And recruiters are trained to know, they'll know if you're out of work. Okay. But if you have multiple opportunities, at least one other, then you will have that power pose, that look on your face that tells the recruiter that you're not just desperate, you're not desperate. So, and as I said, give a salary range. Okay. I always tell candidates, just give me a number. The lower number is you would consider the position, and the upper number is you would absolutely drop what you're doing and give a 2-week notice. Don't give one number, because if you give one number, they're going to give you a lower number to come back with. So have a reach and one that is a number that you would be happy with. Okay. So I just wanted to go over a couple of things. And yes, during the negotiation, kind of lower the feeling of now it's all about money, by just going over your research, what you know about the company. But don't grovel, as we said before. Don't grovel, because you have other opportunities. And that's where the get at least one more company out of your list. And the goal being, do not appear desperate. And I know you guys have seen that before. That's the most important, is you're in control. I went through an interview recently, and based on, even though I go over these type of points, I could break down, after that interview, I could break down from what we've been going over, what I did wrong. And I can tell you this, the more you interview, the better you interview. So you pick those 5 or 6, when you're halfway through them, and it won't take you long in this market, to go through 5 or 6, and you start again. But the more you interview, the more confident you're going to sound, the more you don't need this job you're going to sound, and that's when they come after you. Okay, that's in regular business, and that's in job seeking. So that's the purchase. You've convinced the panel because you did great note taking. You know about the company. You have done a presentation, whether you showed it to them or not. Your words seem very connected. You used the mind mapping, and so you knew exactly what they wanted you to do. They gave you a programming problem, or they gave you some kind of business problem to solve. You whiteboarded it. You were prepared. You were also prepared for the negotiation. You successfully pushed it until the panel was interested in you, and you had at least one more company after you, so you had that certainty and the power stance, as they call it. So you went through the whole process, you had prepared, and you did not appear desperate. Now you have your best chance. And if you've ever seen those panel reviews, they put recommend for hire or they put hold. And of course, you want the majority to say recommend for hire. And there's a scoring system in there. It may come out of 5, and your average is 3.5. And the only bad thing is if you're the first one to get to the interview, they're going to make you sit for a while as they come up with other panel interviews. So just keep that in mind. They'll get back to you, but if they don't move you to the offer process right away, don't fret over that too much. And don't ask the question, are you interviewing others? Because you're putting the recruiter in a bad situation. They're generally going to tell you they are, okay? Because they're doing the same thing. They don't want to appear desperate either. And there is usually a budget. So don't think that they can go back and get more money. That's not how it works, especially big companies. They already have a budget. They have a finance person they've already discussed it. So they're not going to, they may get you to the higher range, but they're not gonna, there's a number in which they will not go past, okay? So next week is kind of a bonus week. We're gonna try to figure out what does loyalty mean? And just real briefly, you've already been hired. So now, loyalty, what does that mean? We're gonna go over that. But one way of being loyal to a company is that you work out, that you actually meet the expectations that they had. And if you were taking notes during the panel interview, you're going to hear those expectations. You're going to see people who are doing things that you may be taking over. That's the whole purpose of hiring somebody. Somebody's not doing something that is needed. So during that, it would be nice if you took notes there, assuming you were going to get an offer. That would be the beginning of loyalty, and making referrals. Once you got there, you can make money off of those referrals. That's loyalty. But we're going to go over that a little more in detail. So I'm going to close this out. I believe we're real close to the 30-minute. And if there's any quick questions, go ahead and throw them out.
I'm good so far.
Okay. All right. So hopefully you see the relationship between marketing yourself and looking for a job. Anybody else? All right, then I will close this out.